Okay, I need to go and cook something because my uncle's here and my mum's here. And I said I'd put some pasta on. Anyway, I'm back. It's okay. So yeah, going back to that conversation, I feel like Anna's not seeing the full picture, and she's not knowing what's going on. Maybe if she knew what was going on, she would have a different perspective of things. Um, you know, 10 years ago, I've always hated Islam, so I don't think I'd ever have taken an Islamic side. I would have just thought they're destroying an Islamic country, and I would have looked at all the people walking around and would have. I get a bad vibe, when you see people dressed up like in medieval clothing, with all those veils, it looks ugly. My personal opinion is if it looks ugly, if I was to wear a veil and only show my face, I would just feel ugly. I would feel like people can't see me. I don't feel like I've got character. I don't feel nice about it, and I feel like the sense of mindlessness because it's not attractive. I do not find Islamic clothing attractive, or people who wear Islamic clothing attractive, or people who wear those veils. They look like zombies to me, and therefore to see war-torn countries where people are walking around like that, or where it's just men, just lots of gatherings of men, it feels scary. It feels like I wouldn't want to be there. And Anna I like analysing why I think she is taking Palestine's side, because I think there's a lot of people that might take Palestine's side, and so I feel like because she's being so anti-Israel, I'm trying to get into her head and understand what she's saying. Like with me, I would just feel like I wouldn't want to be there. I wouldn't want to go to Gaza and be around that area, not only because of the potential threat from Israel and the crossfire that I would get, but also because I just wouldn't like being around these types of environments where it's just large groups of men gathered on the streets. Now I'm noticing that in England there's more and more guys that just gather up in male only, they're all middle-aged or young, maybe even younger than me sometimes, but they all look very strong and fighting age men, and it's, I wouldn't like being in an environment like that because I feel very out of place. I feel very kind of like taken back by how they all look different, but they all look the same. There's strength in numbers, but when the numbers are just people that you don't really know. Like, I don't want to judge people by their looks or anything, but if you start having a fear towards Islam, and then you start seeing lots of people, and a couple of them are wearing Islamic clothing, or Islamic, those upside down popcorn hats, you kind of think like, who is in there is dangerous. Who in there would likely kill me? I know there's a lot of people. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of people in Black Rock that would kill me if they thought that was what they needed to do. I know that there's dangerous people at the top. There's dangerous people at the bottom, and so far I know I shouldn't judge people by saying dangerous is always bad, but I feel like there are some people that are more threatening because we just don't have any similarities, we don't have any kind of common ground or any understanding, and when I see images of Gaza, if I see a doctor trying to help a starving kid, I think that kid's lost. That kid's gonna die. Like, okay, you could give it milk, and you can give him or her milk, and maybe she'll regain strength and get better. But then you're looking at all the other people that are needing food, and I would think these kids have a good chance of surviving. So isn't this kid looks like it's about to go into milk starvation, but this kid looks like it can't recover. So surely if you're in a hospital or in a dog vet, if you're wearing a dog pound, if you have a dog pound, own a dog pound, sorry, I'm not speaking, and you've got to choose which dogs can you help. If there are some dogs that are beyond repair and you don't have the funding, it probably is best to put them down so that you can focus your attention on the ones that can survive. And I know you might think it's wrong to see humans as being dogs, but at the same time, you need to have the same ideology. You need to focus on the ones that have the best chance of surviving. Now, if this was in a world and you just need to save the 100 starving kids by giving them milk, that if that's all it was, then great, but it's not. The bigger problem is if they were given milk, if they were gained strength, there's still other kids that want it. You're taking food away from other kids that need it, giving it to kids that might probably just die in a month, and you've got to start choosing like which one has the best survival rate, and those are going to be the ones that have the least amount of injury, or the least amount of starvation problems, or the least problems. And then you've got the other bigger problem, which is that even if you were able to feed them, how are you going to house them? How are you going to educate them? How are you going to stop them from growing up to be terrorists? You know, if they've lost uncles, aunties, parents, and living with grandparents now, you know, they're going to grow up with so much hatred towards the people that killed their parents, and they're going to fall into the line of terroristic views. And you know, you can't just say, oh, they're all civilians, because how do you know? Have you actually gone round every single person that died and said, was this a rapist? Was this someone who married a child? Was this someone who had a war bride? Was this someone who laughed at the thought of some kid getting raped or something? You know, what type of people are we dealing with? And it's strange how Anna doesn't think like that. She just thinks, you got the bad guys and the civilians. The civilians are good. The bad guys are the bad guys. So she was saying how there was like 100 people that were killed, and only 2 of them were terrorists. So what? You've just killed 100 people, and only 2 of them. You know, she's just seeing it as black and white. You got the 100 good people and then the 2 bad people, and she's just seeing it like that, and she's not realizing, well, yeah, but how many of those thought it was okay to marry 12-year-olds? How many of those thought it was okay to marry 9-year-olds? How many of them thought it was okay to marry 6-year-olds? How many of them laughed at the thought of other people dying? How many of them would mock people for wearing Western clothes? How many people would think that if you walk around dressed like a Westerner, you are a slut? Or if you wear skirts? Or how many, you know, what is their ideology? Because civilians... You think of civilians and you think kind of innocent people that aren't fighting the war, aren't wanting harm to others. You know, when you think of civilians, you think of your world. She's in America. You think of civilians in America, and you think that civilians in America are the same. Well, that's what she's doing. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm doing at all. I'm thinking civilian in Gaza is very different, a very different standard to the civilian in America. And okay, I used to think the civilian in England was better 20 years ago, and now I'm thinking the civilian in England is... Oh, I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. You know, I can think about the problems in Gaza, and there's like too many things to think about. But then again, I don't know. I just know that I wouldn't travel there. I wouldn't want to be there, and I wouldn't even want to look. Why? Because I feel like I'd be putting my life into way too much danger, and I won't be just fearing the danger from Israeli bombs. I'd be feeling the danger from the little kids that think it's funny to throw missiles at me. I would think it's you know, I'd feel danger from Hamas. I'd feel danger from the average civilian who thinks it's fine to rape foreigners. You know, I would be thinking about a ton of things, and the last thing I'd be thinking is these are all innocent people. So, you know, if Anna wants to just see the 100 civilians as being all innocent people with just 10 terrorists or just 2 terrorists amongst the dead, you know, I think she's just being completely blinded to the fact that she doesn't know these people. I mean, I had a client for 5 years. Okay, there's a 2-year gap in between. And I had no idea he didn't even speak English. Like, I thought he spoke English, kind of. Like, he got a lot of things wrong. But he usually, I mildly understood him. But then I was kind of thinking, how many times have I actually spoken to this guy? And it's like, well, I've got all those text messages. Yeah, but the text messages are weird. And you know, and just like... And that kind of also makes me think of Epstein. Like, people think that anyone who has any association with him is a paedophile just for having any kind of contact with him, or just being on a flight to his island means that you're a paedophile who raped kids. And it's just like, yeah, well, I had a client for 5 years. I didn't even realise that he didn't speak English. Just because you know someone and seeing them regularly for 5 years, that doesn't mean you know. Well, that should mean that you know that they speak English. Yeah, I'm being a bit stupid, I think, when it comes to... You don't have to talk within a massage. That's the thing. You don't have to talk within a massage. So, you know, there's a lot of things that you don't know. And if I didn't know the basics about this client that I thought I knew, then I don't think how she can just think there's 100 dead. And who's doing the report? You know, who's actually gone round? These are the 100 people that are dead, and we're going to do the proper checks to find out how many people of those, you know, what of them actually, if they all those 100 people were to do a test on what their beliefs are, what they agree with, you know, what they think is acceptable and what is not, you know, if they all think that it's perfectly fine to be killed for insulting Allah, then they got what they deserve, because by thinking that Allah could only be a male and that males are better than women, they are insulting me, and they all deserve to die. But you shouldn't deserve to die just for that. But, you know, I just, she's not seeing things correctly, and a lot of people don't see things correctly, you know. I know there are terrible people all over the place. There are mad people in America. I don't know what's going on in England. I've seen some things on England in England, and I'm just like, oh, what? I think people are losing their mind. I think the government too is also starting to lose their mind. Some of them, anyway, on some of the decisions. But then again, I don't know if I'm really hearing the story correctly or truthfully, or if I'm only hearing one side. The bigger picture is that there are so many problems, and you can't think about the problems in a country that is full, loaded with problems, and then to think that you need to save the ones that are just constantly suffering, whilst knowing that even if they were saved today, next week, next month, there's no guarantee that they'll make it through the year. There's no guarantee they'll make it for 2 years. And if they did, are they just taking food off other kids that also want it? And I think the same thing can happen with the whole world. That this Gaza thing is just a small piece of the whole puzzle. The whole puzzle is the world. If killing every single one in Gaza is going to help the rest of the world, then you have to see it from God's perspective, because that's how God sees it. That's how my higher self sees it. My higher self sees it as there's 8 billion people in the world, and I've got to help the people that most deserve to be helped, most have the most potential to go far, to live on, to perhaps become a god on another planet. There's all these things that I'm thinking, and I don't want to see suffering. And if they're just going to die and just suffer and suffer and suffer and then die, then what's the point of their suffering? I like to believe that people who suffer have a point. There's a point of their suffering, and their point is that they suffer, they learn, they grow, they change, they evolve, they become stronger. But yeah, if there's only so much resources, if there's only so much space, if there's only so many people that can live here happily, then yeah, cutting back on losses is better. And baby kangaroos, baby elephants, these are all animals, baby dogs, baby cats, these are all animals that are very happy and can have a nice happy life. And if that is that life is a better life than just being a suffering, starving human that just feels rejected from the world and hated by people because they don't fit in or whatever. So